Listen here. Why don't you go back to whatever McDonald's you work at and stop playing dress-up? Officer Bradley Walsh's words cut through the morning air outside Metropolitan Police District 7. He stood blocking the employee entrance, arms crossed, smirking at the black woman in front of him. She wore what appeared to be a police uniform, but Walsh wasn't buying it for a second. The woman's jaw tightened slightly, but her voice remained steady. "Officer Walsh," she said, reading his nameplate, "I suggest you reconsider your tone." Walsh let out a harsh laugh. "Oh, you suggest? That's rich. Ma'am, I don't know what kind of costume party you think this is, but real police work is for real police officers." Her eyes never left his face. "We'll see about that." What Walsh didn't know was that this woman was about to turn his entire world upside down with just one phone call. Have you ever been completely wrong about someone based on a single glance? Detective Captain Zara Johnson had seen this kind of behavior before. In her 15 years with the Metropolitan Police Department, she'd encountered officers like Bradley Walsh more times than she cared to count, but today was different. Today, she wasn't just another target of workplace discrimination. Today, she was here on official business. Zara adjusted the clipboard in her hand, making sure the official internal affairs seal was visible. She'd been conducting surprise inspections for 3 years now, and this precinct had been on her radar for months. The complaints had been piling up. Citizens reporting unprofessional conduct, fellow officers whispering about inappropriate comments. And at the center of it all was Officer Bradley Walsh. Walsh's personnel file made for disturbing reading. 8 years on the force, and in that time, he'd accumulated 17 formal complaints. Excessive force during routine traffic stops. Discriminatory language toward minority suspects. A pattern of behavior that somehow kept slipping through the cracks of internal review. "Look, lady," Walsh continued, his voice growing louder as other officers began to take notice. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is a restricted area. You can't just waltz in here because you bought a uniform online." Zara glanced around the parking lot. Officers Miller and Davis had stopped their conversation to watch the interaction. A few civilians on the sidewalk were starting to pull out their phones. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. "Officer Walsh," Zara said calmly, "I'm here on official business. I need access to the station." "Official business?" Walsh scoffed. "What kind of official business? You selling Girl Scout cookies, raising money for your church?" The casual racism in his tone was unmistakable. Zara had heard it all before, but it never stopped stinging. The assumption that she couldn't possibly belong in law enforcement. The immediate dismissal of her authority. The way he spoke to her like she was a child playing dress-up. Officer Miller approached, curiosity written across his face. "Everything okay here, Bradley?" "Just dealing with another wannabe," Walsh replied, not taking his eyes off Zara. "Probably saw too many cop shows and thinks she can walk into a police station." Zara reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out her department identification. The photo was recent, taken just 6 months ago when she'd been promoted to captain. Her credentials were impeccable. Bronze Star for Valor, Community Service Award, commendations for excellence in internal investigations. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," she said, extending the ID toward Walsh. But Walsh didn't even look at it. Instead, he knocked her hand away with a dismissive gesture. "I don't need to see fake IDs, sweetheart. What I need is for you to turn around and walk away before this becomes a real problem." The word sweetheart hung in the air like a slap. Zara felt her body camera recording every second of this interaction. Good. She wanted it all documented. "Officer Walsh, I'm giving you one last opportunity to handle this professionally," Zara said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I suggest you examine my credentials and contact your supervisor immediately." Walsh's face flushed red. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way, especially not by someone he'd already decided didn't belong. "You know what? I think you're the one with the problem here. You're trespassing on police property, you're refusing to leave when asked, and you're impersonating an officer." "Impersonating an officer?" Zara repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Based on what evidence?" "Based on the fact that I know every officer in this district, and you ain't one of them." What Walsh didn't know was that Zara knew every regulation in the department handbook. She knew every procedure for handling complaints. She knew the exact protocol for surprise inspections, and she knew that everything he was doing right now was creating a paper trail that would end his career. Her radio crackled softly. Dispatch was trying to reach her, probably wondering about the status of her inspection. But Walsh and his colleagues were too focused on their own assumptions to notice the significance of a radio call coming to someone they believed was impersonating an officer. "Officer Walsh," Zara said one final time, "you're making a serious mistake." Walsh laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can fool real cops. Miller, Davis, I think we need to detain this individual for questioning." As the three officers began to circle her, Zara remained perfectly still. She'd been in situations like this before, but never as the target. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was about to be arrested by the very department she worked for, by officers whose behavior she was here to investigate. But she also knew something they didn't. This was all being recorded, and in a few minutes, everything would change. The situation spiraled faster than anyone could have anticipated. Officer Davis positioned himself behind Zara while Miller flanked her left side. Walsh stood directly in front of her, his chest puffed out with the kind of aggressive posture that had become his signature during confrontations. To any passerby, it looked like 3 armed officers surrounding a single woman who posed no visible threat. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to put your hands where I can see them," Walsh announced loudly, his voice carrying across the parking lot. Several more officers had emerged from the station, drawn by the commotion. Zara slowly raised her hands, palms open and visible. Every movement was deliberate, professional, textbook. "Officers, I'm complying with your request. I want to remind you that this entire interaction is being recorded by multiple body cameras." "Yeah, our body cameras," Walsh sneered, "which will show exactly what they need to show." The threat was unmistakable. Zara had heard stories of footage mysteriously malfunctioning or disappearing when it didn't support the official narrative. But what Walsh didn't realize was that her own body camera was also recording, and its footage was automatically uploaded to a secure server that only Internal Affairs could access. "Officer Walsh, before this goes any further, I strongly advise you to contact your watch commander. My presence here is authorized at the highest levels of this department." Walsh's face twisted with irritation. "Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but I'm the one wearing a real badge here. I'm the one with actual authority, and right now, you're under investigation for criminal impersonation of a police officer." A small crowd had begun to gather on the sidewalk. Morning commuters slowed their pace to watch the unfolding drama. Cell phones appeared, recording the scene from multiple angles. Zara noticed an elderly woman shaking her head in disgust, and a young man live-streaming on social media with the caption, "Police harassment in progress." "Criminal impersonation?" Zara repeated calmly. "Officer Walsh, what specific evidence do you have to support that charge?" "The evidence is standing right in front of me. You're not a cop. Real cops don't look like you." The words hung in the air like a confession. Miller and Davis exchanged uncomfortable glances, but neither spoke up. This was Walsh's show, and they were just following his lead. "What do real cops look like, Officer Walsh?" Zara asked, her voice steady despite the growing absurdity of the situation. Walsh realized he'd said too much. "Real cops have real training. Real cops have real badges. Real cops don't show up at police stations pretending to be something they're not." "I see. And you've determined all of this without examining my credentials, without contacting a supervisor, and without following any standard verification procedures." "I don't need procedures to spot a fake." Sergeant Mike Torres had been watching from the station entrance, growing increasingly uncomfortable with what he was witnessing. He approached the group, his expression troubled. "Walsh, what's the situation here?" "Sarge, we've got a code 843. Subject is impersonating an officer and refusing to leave police property." Torres looked at Zara, taking in her immaculate uniform, her professional bearing, and her calm demeanor under pressure. Something didn't add up. "Ma'am, may I see your identification?" Zara reached slowly toward her pocket, making sure her movements were visible to all the cameras. She withdrew her department ID and extended it toward Torres. But Walsh intercepted it, snatching the ID from her hand before Torres could examine it. "Sarge, don't waste your time. It's obviously fake. Look at this photo. Does this look like police department quality to you?" Torres frowned. "Walsh, let me see that." Trust me, Sarge, I know a fake when I see one. This whole thing is a scam. Probably trying to get inside the station to steal something or case the joint for her criminal friends. The casual accusation of criminality based on nothing but assumptions made several bystanders gasp audibly. The young man with the live stream shook his head and increased his commentary volume so viewers could hear his outrage. Zara's radio crackled again. This time, the transmission was clearer. Detective Captain Johnson, please respond regarding status of District 7 inspection. Walsh quickly reached out and turned the volume down on her radio. Nice try. You can buy police radios online these days. Real convincing. But Torres had heard enough of the transmission to raise an eyebrow. Walsh, maybe we should slow this down and... Sarge, respectfully, I've got this under control. We need to get this individual processed and off the street before she cons someone else. Zara watched the interaction with professional interest. She'd seen this dynamic before during her investigations. Senior officers who might have better judgment allowing subordinates to take the lead because it was easier than confronting problematic behavior. Torres clearly had doubts, but he wasn't willing to override Walsh's authority in front of witnesses. Officer Walsh, Zara said quietly, I want to be very clear about something. When this is over, when the truth comes out, you're going to wish you had handled this differently. Is that a threat? Walsh snapped, his hand moving reflexively toward his weapon. It's not a threat. It's a professional observation based on my experience with officer misconduct cases. Officer misconduct cases? What would you know about officer misconduct cases? Zara smiled slightly. More than you might think. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown larger. Someone had called it in to local news, and a reporter was already en route. Social media posts were multiplying, with hashtags starting to trend. The department's public relations nightmare was just beginning, but Walsh was too focused on proving his point to notice. All right, that's enough, Walsh announced. Ma'am, you're under arrest for criminal impersonation of a police officer, trespassing on police property, and disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct? Zara asked. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't made any threatening gestures, and I've complied with every reasonable request. Your whole presence here is disorderly. You're causing a disturbance, you're wasting police resources, and you're creating a public safety hazard. Torres stepped forward. Walsh, maybe we should... Sarge, I need you to trust me on this one. I know what I'm doing. But as Walsh reached for his handcuffs, Zara made one final attempt to de-escalate. Officer Walsh, I'm going to ask you one more time to contact your watch commander. Tell them that Internal Affairs Captain Zara Johnson is here for a scheduled inspection. They'll confirm my identity and authorization. Walsh paused for just a moment. The specificity of her statement, the confidence in her voice, the way she used exact titles and procedures, it was almost convincing. Almost. Nice try, sweetheart. But I wasn't born yesterday. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. As the handcuffs clicked into place around Zara's wrists, she felt a familiar mixture of professional disappointment and personal hurt. Disappointed because this kind of behavior was exactly why her department needed better oversight. Hurt because, despite years of experience, it still stung to be treated as less than human. Officer Walsh, she said as he tightened the cuffs, I want you to remember this moment. Remember how certain you were. Remember how convinced you felt that you were doing the right thing. Save the speeches for your lawyer, Walsh replied, guiding her toward a patrol car. But as they walked across the parking lot, Zara's radio crackled one more time. This time, the transmission was crystal clear. All units, be advised that Detective Captain Johnson should have arrived at District 7 for her inspection. Please confirm her status immediately. Walsh quickly reached over and turned off her radio entirely. Enough with the theater. What he didn't realize was that dispatch was now actively looking for her. And when internal affairs captains go missing during official inspections, people start asking very serious questions very quickly. The patrol car door slammed shut behind her, but Zara wasn't worried. She was angry, yes. Disappointed, absolutely. But worried? Not at all. Because she knew something that Officer Walsh was about to learn the hard way. The truth has a way of catching up with people who try to ignore it. The ride to the processing area took less than 3 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Zara sat in the back of the patrol car, her hands cuffed behind her back, watching familiar streets pass by through bulletproof glass. She'd made this same journey countless times as an officer, but never as a detainee. Officer Davis drove while Walsh rode shotgun, occasionally glancing back at her with satisfaction. "You picked the wrong precinct to run your little scam," he said through the partition. "We don't play games here." Zara remained silent. Every word out of Walsh's mouth was being recorded by the car's audio system, creating an ever-growing pile of evidence that would eventually bury him. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was to let problematic officers talk themselves into unemployment. At the station's rear entrance, Walsh made a show of helping her out of the car, his grip unnecessarily firm on her arm. "Watch your head," he said with mock concern, guiding her toward the processing door. Inside, the booking area buzzed with its usual activity. Sergeant Rosa Martinez looked up from her desk as they entered, her eyebrows rising at the sight of a woman in a police uniform being brought in wearing handcuffs. "What do we have here?" Martinez asked, setting down her coffee. "Criminal impersonation of a police officer," Walsh announced proudly, "plus trespassing and disorderly conduct. Subject was attempting to gain unauthorized access to the station using fake credentials." Martinez studied Zara's face, taking in her calm demeanor and professional bearing. Something felt off about this arrest. "Did you run her ID through the system?" "Didn't need to. It was obviously fake. I can spot a con artist from a mile away." "Walsh, protocol requires that we verify all identification before processing any impersonation charges. You know that." Walsh's jaw tightened. "Sarge Martinez, respectfully, I've been doing this job for 8 years. I think I can tell the difference between a real cop and someone playing dress-up." Martinez turned to Zara. "Ma'am, what's your name?" "Detective Captain Zara Johnson, Internal Affairs Division, badge number 4792. The specificity of her response made Martinez pause. Con artists usually kept their stories vague to avoid contradictions. This woman was providing exact details that could be easily verified. "Captain Johnson," Martinez repeated. "You're claiming to be a captain?" "I'm not claiming anything. I am Captain Johnson. I was conducting a scheduled inspection of this precinct when Officer Walsh decided to arrest me without cause." Walsh laughed harshly. "Scheduled inspection? Come on, Sarge. She's good, I'll give her that. But we both know Internal Affairs doesn't send captains to do surprise inspections. They send low-level investigators." What Walsh didn't know was that Martinez had worked with Internal Affairs before. She knew their procedures, and she knew that high-ranking officers absolutely did conduct surprise inspections when serious allegations were involved. "Ma'am, you said you're here for an inspection. Do you have any documentation?" Zara nodded toward her clipboard, which Walsh was still holding. "Officer Walsh confiscated my inspection orders along with my credentials. They're in the folder attached to that clipboard." Martinez looked at Walsh expectantly. "Let me see the paperwork." Walsh hesitated. He'd been so focused on proving that Zara was fake that he hadn't actually examined any of her documents. "The paperwork's fake too, Sarge. It's all part of the con." "Then it won't hurt to look at it, will it?" Reluctantly, Walsh handed over the clipboard. Martinez opened the folder and immediately froze. The letterhead was authentic department stationery. The inspection order bore the signature of Commissioner Thompson himself, and the date was today's date. "Walsh," Martinez said slowly, "these documents look legitimate." "They can't be legitimate. Look at her. Does she look like a police captain to you?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Martinez's expression hardened. "What exactly is that supposed to mean, Officer Walsh?" Walsh realized he'd stepped in it again. I mean she doesn't look familiar. I know most of the brass in this district." "Internal Affairs operates out of headquarters, Walsh. They don't spend time in district stations." A detention officer named Kim Carter had been listening to the exchange while processing other arrestees. "Excuse me, Sergeant Martinez. The subject is requesting her phone call." Walsh whipped around. "She doesn't get a phone call until booking is complete." Martinez frowned. "Walsh, all detainees are entitled to a phone call regardless of charges. That's basic constitutional law." "But what if she's part of a larger conspiracy? What if she calls her accomplices?" "Her accomplices?" Martinez couldn't hide her incredulity. "Officer Walsh, You arrested one woman carrying paperwork. What kind of conspiracy are you imagining? Zara spoke up for the first time since entering the building. Sergeant Martinez, I'd like to exercise my right to a phone call. I believe a single conversation will clear up this misunderstanding very quickly. Martinez nodded. Of course. Officer Carter, please escort the detainee to the phone. Her name isn't Captain anything, Walsh protested. Don't let her scam you too, Sarge. But Martinez was already having serious doubts about this arrest. The documentation looked authentic. The woman's demeanor was completely professional, and Walsh's behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. As Carter led Zara to the phone bank, Walsh continued his protests. This is a mistake, Sarge. You're letting her contact her criminal network. When this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you. Zara picked up the phone and dialed a number from memory. The call connected after 2 rings. Commissioner Thompson's office. This is Linda. Linda, this is Captain Johnson. I need to speak with the commissioner immediately. It's urgent. Captain Johnson? Aren't you supposed to be conducting an inspection at District 7? That's exactly why I need to speak with him. The conversation was brief and professional, but Walsh could see Martinez straining to overhear. Whatever was being said, it didn't sound like criminal conspiracy planning. After 3 minutes, Zara hung up the phone and turned to Martinez. Sergeant, I suggest you prepare for a phone call. And I suggest Officer Walsh prepare for a very difficult conversation. Walsh's confidence was beginning to crack, but he doubled down. More theater. She's probably calling her lawyer or her bail bondsman. But Martinez was looking at Zara with growing recognition. Something about her face was familiar. Had she seen her picture before? In a department newsletter, maybe? Or a commendation ceremony? The phone at Martinez's desk rang. She looked at the caller ID and her face went pale. District 7, Sergeant Martinez speaking. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Commissioner Thompson himself. And he did not sound happy. Sergeant Martinez, this is Commissioner Thompson. I understand you have Detective Captain Zara Johnson in custody. The words hit the booking area like a thunderclap. Martinez's face drained of color as she gripped the phone receiver. Around the room, conversation stopped. Officer Carter froze mid-step. Even the detained suspects looked up from their benches, but Officer Walsh heard only what he wanted to hear. See? He said triumphantly. She's obviously been calling people pretending to be this Captain Johnson person. Probably has a whole network of accomplices. Commissioner, my ass. She probably called some friend to impersonate Officer Walsh, Martinez whispered harshly, covering the phone's mouthpiece. Shut up, right now. The deadly serious tone in her voice finally penetrated Walsh's overconfidence. He looked around the room and noticed that everyone was staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror. Martinez returned to the call. Yes, Commissioner, she's here. She was arrested by Officer Walsh approximately 20 minutes ago. On what charges? The Commissioner's voice was loud enough that several people could hear it through the receiver. Criminal impersonation of a police officer, trespassing, and disorderly conduct, sir. The silence that followed was deafening. When Commissioner Thompson finally spoke again, his voice was ice cold. Sergeant Martinez, I want you to listen very carefully. Detective Captain Zara Johnson is one of the most decorated officers in our department. She has 15 years of exemplary service. She was conducting an authorized surprise inspection of your facility this morning at my direct request. And apparently, one of your officers just arrested her for impersonating herself. Walsh felt his knees go weak. The room started spinning. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of elaborate hoax. The woman standing 10 feet away, still wearing handcuffs, couldn't possibly be a police captain. Could she? Furthermore, the commissioner continued, Captain Johnson leads our Internal Affairs Division. She specializes in investigating officer misconduct, discrimination, and excessive force complaints. The irony of this situation is not lost on me. Martinez looked at Zara with a mixture of awe and terror. Internal Affairs. The woman Walsh had arrested was Internal Affairs. The woman he'd insulted and degraded and accused of criminal behavior was the person responsible for investigating exactly that kind of behavior. Sir, Martinez managed, what are your orders? Release Captain Johnson immediately. Remove those handcuffs and treat her with the respect her rank and service deserve. and I want a full incident report on my desk within the hour. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead. Martinez stared at the phone for a moment, then looked at Walsh. His face had gone from red to white to green in the span of 30 seconds. "Officer Carter," Martinez said quietly, "please remove Captain Johnson's restraints." As the handcuffs came off, Zara rubbed her wrists and straightened her uniform. She'd remained silent during the entire phone call, letting the truth speak for itself. Now she turned to face Walsh directly. "Officer Walsh," she said, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority, "I believe you wanted to see my credentials?" She reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew her badge wallet, opening it to reveal her captain's bars and internal affairs identification. The badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, authentic and undeniable. Walsh stared at the badge as if it might disappear if he blinked. But you... I don't understand." "What don't you understand, Officer Walsh? That a black woman can hold a position of authority in law enforcement? That someone who doesn't look like you might outrank you? Or that your assumptions about people might sometimes be wrong?" The questions hung in the air like indictments. Around the room, other officers had gathered to witness the aftermath of what was already being called the biggest screw-up in District 7's history. Sergeant Martinez approached Zara cautiously. "Captain Johnson, I apologize profusely for this incident. If there's anything I can do..." Zara held up a hand. "Sergeant Martinez, you followed proper procedure once you had all the facts. You're not the problem here." Her eyes never left Walsh's face. "The problem is systemic assumptions and unchecked bias." Walsh finally found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Captain, I thought... I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You saw what you expected to see based on your preconceptions. You refused to examine my credentials. You dismissed my radio communications. You ignored every piece of evidence that contradicted your assumptions." Officer Miller and Davis had arrived, drawn by the commotion. When they saw Zara's badge and Captain's bars, their faces went ashen. They'd been complicit in the arrest of an internal affairs captain. Their careers were likely over. "Ma'am," Miller stammered, "we were just following Walsh's lead. We didn't know..." "Officers Miller and Davis," Zara said without turning to look at them, "you had eyes and ears. You chose to follow rather than think. That's a choice, not an excuse." The booking area had become completely silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of radio chatter. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Walsh made one last desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. "Captain, surely you understand the confusion. It's not common to see... we don't usually..." "We don't usually see what, Officer Walsh? Black women in positions of authority? Black women who know police procedure? Black women who deserve basic professional respect?" Each question was like a hammer blow. Walsh realized that every word out of his mouth was making things worse, but he couldn't seem to stop himself. "I just meant that Internal Affairs usually sends advance notice before inspections." Zara smiled coldly. "Officer Walsh, the whole point of a surprise inspection is that it's a surprise. And based on what I've witnessed this morning, my decision to conduct an unannounced visit was absolutely justified." The sound of approaching sirens could be heard outside. Commissioner Thompson was arriving, along with what sounded like multiple vehicles. This incident was about to become very official, very quickly. "Captain," Martinez said nervously, "is there anything we should prepare for the Commissioner's arrival?" Zara looked around the room at the assembled officers, taking in their faces, their body language, their obvious discomfort. "Sergeant Martinez, I suggest you prepare for a very thorough review of this precinct's training procedures, supervision protocols, and complaint history." She turned back to Walsh one final time. "And Officer Walsh, I suggest you prepare for a career change." The sirens were getting louder. In a few minutes, the full weight of the police department's command structure would descend on District 7. And at the center of it all would be the woman Walsh had dismissed as a fake, a con artist, someone who didn't belong. But she did belong. In fact, she was about to prove just how much she belonged by ending his career with the same phone call he'd mocked as theater. The irony was perfect. And for Zara Johnson, it was just another day at the office. The first black SUV pulled into the District 7 parking lot exactly 14 minutes after Commissioner Thompson's phone call. The second and third vehicles followed within 30 seconds, disgorging a small army of brass, internal affairs investigators, and departmental attorneys. The cavalry had arrived, and they looked ready for war. Commissioner Thompson emerged from the lead vehicle like a man on a mission. At 58, he was a veteran of 35 years in law enforcement, and he'd seen every kind of departmental crisis imaginable. But this one was special. This one involved his hand-picked internal affairs captain being arrested by the very officers she was investigating. Captain Johnson met him at the station entrance, her uniform still crisp despite her ordeal. "Commissioner?" "Captain Johnson, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, sir, but we have a significant problem." Thompson's jaw tightened. "I'm aware. Where's the officer who arrested you?" "Inside, sir, along with 2 officers who assisted and several witnesses." "Good. Let's get this sorted out." The commissioner's entrance into the booking area was like a force of nature. Conversations stopped. Officers snapped to attention. Even the detained suspects seemed to sense that something momentous was happening. "Where's Sergeant Martinez?" Thompson demanded. "Here, sir," Martinez replied, stepping forward with obvious nervousness. "Conference room, now. I want Officer Walsh, the 2 officers who assisted him, and Captain Johnson. Everyone else clear the area." The procession to the conference room felt like a funeral march. Walsh walked as if in a trance, still unable to fully process what had happened. Miller and Davis flanked him, their faces pale with the realization that their careers were likely over. Thompson closed the conference room door and gestured for everyone to sit. The tension in the room was suffocating. "Before we begin," Thompson announced, "I want everyone to understand that this conversation is being recorded. Everything said here will become part of an official investigation. Officer Walsh, you have the right to have union representation present." Walsh shook his head numbly. I don't think I need—" "Trust me," Thompson said coldly. "You need representation, but we're proceeding regardless." He opened a thick folder and spread its contents across the conference table. Body camera footage screenshots, witness statements, audio transcripts. The evidence of Walsh's behavior was overwhelming and undeniable. "Officer Walsh, I've reviewed the preliminary report of this morning's incident. According to multiple sources, you prevented Captain Johnson from entering this facility, refused to examine her credentials, ignored her radio communications, and ultimately arrested her without probable cause." Walsh stared at the evidence spread before him. Screenshots from body camera footage showed him knocking Johnson's ID from her hands. Audio transcripts captured his dismissive comments and casual racism. Witness statements described his aggressive posture and inappropriate remarks. "Sir, I thought she was impersonating an officer. I was protecting the integrity of this facility." By refusing to verify her identification? By ignoring standard protocols? By making assumptions based on what exactly? The question hung in the air like a trap. Walsh realized that any answer he gave would incriminate him further. Captain Johnson spoke for the first time since entering the room. "Commissioner, may I share what I observed during Officer Walsh's interaction with me?" "Please proceed, Captain." "Officer Walsh made several statements that suggest a pattern of discriminatory thinking. He told me to go back to McDonald's and stop playing dress-up. He referred to me as sweetheart multiple times despite my objections. He stated that real cops don't look like me. And when asked what real cops look like, he was unable to provide any criteria beyond appearance." Thompson's expression darkened with each revelation. "Officer Walsh, do you dispute Captain Johnson's account?" Walsh looked around the room desperately, seeking some escape from the trap he'd built for himself. "Sir, I was just trying to maintain security. Maybe my language was unfortunate, but my intentions were good." "Your intentions were good?" Thompson's voice rose slightly. "Officer Walsh, Captain Johnson is a 15-year veteran with commendations for valor, community service, and excellence in investigation. She has a master's degree in criminal justice and has completed advanced training in bias recognition and de-escalation techniques. She was here conducting an authorized inspection of this facility, and you arrested her because she doesn't look like your idea of a police officer." Miller shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Commissioner, if I may, we were just following Walsh's lead. We trusted his judgment. Officer Miller, you have eyes. You have training. You have a responsibility to think independently. When you saw Captain Johnson's professional demeanor, her knowledge of police procedures, her calm response to escalating aggression, did it not occur to you that something was wrong with this arrest? Miller had no answer. The truth was that he'd been uncomfortable from the beginning, but it had been easier to follow Walsh than to challenge him. Thompson turned to Davis. Officer Davis, according to the report, you were the one who actually applied the handcuffs. What was your justification for restraining a suspect who was fully compliant and showed no signs of resistance? Davis mumbled something inaudible. Speak up, Officer Davis. I was following orders, sir. Following orders to violate someone's civil rights? Following orders to ignore departmental procedures? Following orders to participate in what amounts to false imprisonment? The weight of their situation was finally sinking in for all three officers. This wasn't just a disciplinary matter. This was a federal civil rights violation. This was career-ending misconduct. This was the kind of incident that made national news and triggered Department of Justice investigations. Thompson opened another folder, this one containing Walsh's personnel file. Officer Walsh, in your 8 years with this department, you've accumulated 17 formal complaints. Excessive force. Discriminatory language. Inappropriate conduct during traffic stops. Failure to follow procedure. Each time you've received counseling or minor discipline. Each time you've promised to do better. And each time the behavior has continued. He spread the complaint forms across the table like playing cards. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled over for a broken taillight, says you asked her about her immigration status despite her having a valid driver's license. Mr. Thompson stopped for speeding, says you used racial slurs during the encounter. Ms. Washington, reporting a domestic disturbance, says you questioned whether she was telling the truth because women like her frequently lie to police. Each complaint was a nail in Walsh's professional coffin. The pattern was undeniable, damning, and well documented. Sir, Walsh said weakly, those complaints were all investigated. I was cleared each time. You were cleared because the investigating officers gave you the benefit of the doubt. Because complaint investigations in this department have historically been inadequate. Because the system protected officers instead of holding them accountable. Thompson's voice carried the weight of institutional failure. That ends today. Captain Johnson opened her own folder. Commissioner, my inspection of this precinct was prompted by a significant increase in citizen complaints over the past 6 months. Officer Walsh accounts for 40% of those complaints, despite representing only 8% of this precinct's personnel. The mathematics of discrimination were stark and undeniable. Walsh wasn't just a problem officer, he was a crisis waiting to happen. Furthermore, Johnson continued, my review of body camera footage from the past year shows a pattern of disparate treatment based on race, gender, and perceived socioeconomic status. Officer Walsh consistently uses different language, different tones, and different levels of aggression, depending on the demographics of the people he encounters. She produced a tablet and began playing video clips. Walsh speaking respectfully to a white businessman during a traffic stop. Walsh using aggressive language with a black teenager in the exact same circumstances. Walsh offering assistance to a white woman reporting a crime. Walsh questioning the credibility of a Latina woman making an identical report. The evidence was overwhelming, systematic, and professionally damning. Thompson closed the folders and looked directly at Walsh. Officer Walsh, based on the evidence presented and your actions this morning, I am placing you on immediate administrative suspension pending a full investigation. Your badge and weapon will be surrendered before you leave this building. Walsh's face crumpled. Sir, please, this job is all I have. I can change, I can do better. Officer Walsh, you've had 8 years and 17 complaints to do better. Instead, you arrested a superior officer because she didn't match your prejudices. That's not a mistake. That's not poor judgment. That's a fundamental character flaw that makes you unsuitable for law enforcement. Miller and Davis watched in horror as their colleagues' career disintegrated before their eyes. They knew they were next. Officers Miller and Davis, Thompson continued, you are both suspended for 30 days without pay. You will undergo mandatory retraining in civil rights, de-escalation, and independent decision-making. Any future incidents of this nature will result in termination. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of normal police work continuing outside. 3 careers had been irrevocably altered in the span of an hour. Thompson stood up. This incident represents a failure at multiple levels. It's a failure of training, supervision, and culture. It's a failure to recognize and address problematic behavior before it escalates. And it's a failure to protect the very communities we've sworn to serve. He looked around the room one final time. Captain Johnson, please continue your inspection. I want a full report on this precinct's operations, training records, and complaint handling procedures. If there are systemic problems, I want them identified and corrected immediately. Johnson nodded. Yes, sir. As Thompson prepared to leave, Walsh made one final plea. Commissioner, what about my family? What about my pension? I've got 15 years left until retirement. Thompson paused at the door. Officer Walsh, you should have thought about your family before you decided that badge gave you the right to mistreat people based on their appearance. Actions have consequences. This is yours. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Walsh's career was over. Miller and Davis faced uncertain futures, and Captain Johnson still had work to do. But for the first time in 8 years, the citizens of District 7 were a little bit safer from the kind of police misconduct that had just destroyed 3 careers in a single morning. Justice, it turned out, could be swift when the evidence was overwhelming and the will to act was finally present. The formal disciplinary hearing took place 48 hours later in the department's downtown headquarters. The conference room was packed with brass, union representatives, legal counsel, and members of the press who had gotten wind of the story. What had started as a routine morning shift had become a department-wide reckoning. Captain Johnson sat at the witness table, her testimony calm and methodical. She recounted every detail of her encounter with Officer Walsh, from his initial dismissive comment to the moment the handcuffs were removed. Her words carried the weight of 15 years of professional credibility. The pattern of behavior I witnessed from Officer Walsh represents a fundamental failure to uphold the constitutional rights of citizens, she testified. His actions were not the result of confusion or misunderstanding. They were the result of deeply held biases that made him unfit for law enforcement. Walsh's attorney, a seasoned police union representative named Frank Morrison, attempted to paint the incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding. My client made an error in judgment, but his intentions were to protect department security. Officer Walsh has served this community for 8 years without a major incident. Commissioner Thompson's response was swift and decisive. Counselor, your client has 17 documented complaints in his personnel file. That's not an unblemished record. That's a pattern of misconduct that this department failed to address adequately. The hearing reviewed the mountain of evidence that had accumulated over just 2 days. Body camera footage from the arrest, audio recordings of Walsh's discriminatory comments, witness statements from civilians and fellow officers, a comprehensive analysis of Walsh's complaint history dating back to his first year on the force. But the most damning evidence came from Captain Johnson's expanded investigation of District 7. Her team had uncovered a culture of casual racism and unchecked bias that went far beyond Walsh's individual behavior. We found evidence of a systemic problem, Johnson reported. Officers routinely use different standards for different communities, supervisors failing to address obvious red flags in officer behavior, a complaint process that discouraged citizens from reporting misconduct and failed to hold officers accountable when they did. The numbers were staggering. Minority citizens were 3 times more likely to be searched during traffic stops. Use of force incidents disproportionately involved Black and Latino suspects. Complaint investigations consistently favored officer testimony over civilian accounts, even when video evidence suggested otherwise. The 3-member disciplinary panel deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, their faces were grim but determined. Officer Bradley Walsh, announced Chief Hearing Officer Margaret Carter, this panel finds you guilty of violating departmental policies regarding professional conduct, equal treatment of citizens, and abuse of authority. Your actions on the morning in question were not only unprofessional but potentially criminal. Walsh sat motionless as his fate was sealed. Furthermore, Your 8-year pattern of discriminatory behavior represents a fundamental incompatibility with the values and mission of this police department. Effective immediately, you are terminated from employment with the Metropolitan Police Department. Your pension benefits are forfeited, and you are permanently barred from law enforcement employment in this jurisdiction. The gavel came down with finality. Walsh's career was over, his reputation destroyed, his future uncertain. Morrison immediately announced plans to appeal, but everyone in the room knew it was futile. The evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear, the department's liability too great. Officers Miller and Davis received 30-day suspensions without pay, mandatory bias training, and 1-year probationary status. Any future incidents would result in immediate termination. Their careers were damaged but salvageable, contingent on demonstrating real change. But the biggest changes came at the institutional level. Commissioner Thompson announced a comprehensive reform package that would reshape how the department handled bias complaints and officer misconduct. Effective immediately, Thompson declared, all bias-related complaints will be investigated by internal affairs rather than local supervisors. Officers with multiple complaints will undergo mandatory psychological evaluation and bias training. And any officer who interferes with a legitimate internal affairs investigation will face automatic termination. The reforms went further. Body camera footage would be randomly audited for signs of disparate treatment. Community oversight panels would review use of force incidents. Regular bias training would become mandatory for all personnel, from rookie officers to senior command staff. Captain Johnson was promoted to Deputy Commissioner of Professional Standards, giving her department-wide authority to implement reforms and investigate misconduct. Her first act was to create a rapid response team for bias complaints, ensuring that future incidents would be addressed within hours rather than months. The ripple effects extended beyond the police department. The local NAACP praised the swift action and comprehensive reforms. Community leaders who had spent years fighting police misconduct finally felt heard. And other police departments across the country began examining their own complaint processes and officer training programs. But perhaps the most significant change was cultural. Word spread quickly through law enforcement circles about what happened to Officer Walsh. The message was clear. The days of consequence-free bias were over. Officers who couldn't treat all citizens with equal respect would find themselves looking for new careers. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the system had demonstrated its capacity for self-correction when leadership had the courage to act. 6 months later, Detective Captain Zara Johnson stood in the same parking lot where her ordeal had begun. But everything had changed. The hostile atmosphere that once permeated District 7 had been replaced by something resembling actual professionalism. The reforms were working. Bias complaints had dropped by 60% across the department. Use of force incidents involving minority citizens had decreased significantly. Community trust surveys showed the highest approval ratings in over a decade. Most importantly, officers were finally being held accountable for their actions. The culture change has been remarkable, Johnson reflected during a recent interview. Officers know they're being watched, evaluated, and held to high standards. But more than that, they're starting to understand that treating all citizens with dignity and respect isn't just policy, it's the foundation of effective policing. Officer Walsh's appeal had been denied at every level. He now worked as a security guard at a shopping mall, earning a fraction of his former salary and facing a lifetime ban from law enforcement. His story had become a cautionary tale told in police academies across the country. Miller and Davis had completed their retraining and returned to duty with notably improved performance records. The experience had been a wake-up call that fundamentally changed how they approached their jobs. They became advocates for the very reforms they had once resisted. "I was wrong," Officer Miller admitted during a voluntary interview. "I let someone else do my thinking for me, and I almost destroyed my career in the process. Now I understand that following orders doesn't excuse participating in discrimination." The changes extended far beyond individual officers. District 7 had become a model for community policing, with regular town halls, civilian oversight panels, and partnerships with local organizations. Crime rates had actually decreased as community cooperation increased. Captain Johnson's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Commissioner Thompson. "Another department wants to implement our reforms. Can you consult with them next month?" She smiled and typed back, "Absolutely. The work continues." The work did continue because changing institutional culture was an ongoing process, not a one-time event. But the foundation had been laid. Officers knew that bias and discrimination would not be tolerated. Communities knew that their complaints would be taken seriously. And leaders knew that swift, decisive action was both possible and necessary. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Officer Walsh's attempt to humiliate and marginalize Captain Johnson had backfired spectacularly, triggering the very reforms he would have opposed. His career had ended, but the positive changes he inadvertently sparked would protect thousands of citizens for years to come. As Johnson walked back toward the station, the same entrance Walsh had blocked 6 months earlier, she reflected on the power of persistence and professionalism. She could have responded to his aggression with anger. She could have let his bias derail her mission. Instead, she had remained calm, collected evidence, and let the system work. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice is simply refusing to let it break you. The parking lot was quiet now, peaceful in a way it hadn't been before. Officers nodded respectfully as they passed her. Citizens approached the building without fear or hesitation. Children playing nearby waved at the officers they now saw as protectors rather than threats. This was what policing could look like when bias was eliminated and accountability was real. This was what justice looked like when leaders had the courage to act. And this was just the beginning. What about you? Have you ever witnessed bias in your community? Have you seen situations where someone's assumptions led them to make terrible mistakes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about justice prevailing over prejudice. Together, we can build the change we want to see in our communities. Because when good people stand up and demand better, better is exactly what we get.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.
Looks like you took a wrong turn. This neighborhood isn't for your kind. 5 men surround Layla Wilson in the deserted parking garage. Their leader steps forward. Layla's heart pounds as she calculates escape routes. The men block all obvious exits, moving closer with predatory confidence. Their ringleader, a tall man with a distinctive tattoo, taunts, "No one to help you now, no cameras, no witnesses." What these men don't realize, Layla Wilson isn't just any target. 8 years as a Navy SEAL combat specialist taught her exactly how to handle ambushes, even when outnumbered 5 to 1. As the men close in, Layla's expression shifts from frightened to calculating. These attackers have no idea who they've cornered. Her eyes narrow as she identifies the weakest points in their formation. Earlier that day, Layla Wilson arrives in Westridge, a predominantly white suburban community where she's purchased a home after retiring from naval special warfare. As she explores her new neighborhood, we witness subtle hostility. Suspicious glances, residents crossing the street to avoid her, store clerks following her through aisles. At a local coffee shop, Layla overhears conversations stop when she enters. The barista serves other customers first, despite her being next in line. When Layla politely points this out, the barista begrudgingly takes her order but intentionally misspells her name as LaQuisha on the cup. Outside, a group of men watch her from their table. Their leader, Vincent Harker, mutters something that makes the others laugh. As Layla leaves, Vincent loudly comments, "Neighborhood's really going downhill lately. Property values won't last with these new elements moving in." Layla ignores the comment, maintaining her composure. She's faced worse in combat zones. But we see her mentally noting Vincent's face, his distinctive tattoo, and the license plate of his truck as she leaves. Flashback reveals Layla's SEAL training, learning to observe threats, memorize details under pressure, maintain situational awareness. Her instructor's voice. The difference between operators and civilians? We never stop assessing. Later, Layla meets her one friendly neighbor, an elderly woman named Helen who welcomes her warmly. Helen subtly warns Layla about some troublemakers in the area, mentioning Vincent and his friends have caused problems for other newcomers to the neighborhood. As Layla drives home that evening, she notices a truck following her, the same one from the coffee shop. She calmly takes an unexpected turn, confirming her suspicion. This isn't random. She's being hunted. Her eyes narrow as she identifies the weakest points in their formation. That evening, Layla heads to the local grocery store. Inside, she encounters Vincent and two of his friends. They follow her through the aisles, making loud comments about cleaning up the neighborhood and people who don't belong. When Layla reaches the checkout, Vincent positions himself behind her in line. He intentionally bumps into her, then accuses her of backing into him. The cashier, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene, rushes through Layla's transaction. In the parking lot, Vincent and his friends approach Layla as she loads groceries into her car. They form a loose semicircle, blocking her path back to the driver's door. Vincent steps forward. "You know, some folks around here are concerned about new people not understanding how things work in Westridge." Layla responds calmly. "I understand exactly how things should work in America. Excuse me." She moves to step around them. Vincent blocks her path. "We're just being neighborly, making sure you feel welcome." His tone makes the threat clear. Layla assesses 3 men, overconfident, probably unarmed but physically imposing. She notices security cameras covering the parking lot and other shoppers nearby. Not an optimal attack scenario for Vincent. She makes eye contact with Vincent, her posture subtly shifting from civilian to operator. Something in her gaze, the absolute absence of fear, momentarily disconcerts him. Layla speaks quietly. "I appreciate your concern for the neighborhood. I value community safety too." The controlled precision in her voice causes Vincent to step back involuntarily. A family with children walks nearby, disrupting the tension. Vincent forces a laugh, playing off the confrontation. "Just having a friendly chat with our new neighbor. See you around." As they walk away, Layla overhears one friend asking, "Why'd you back off?" Vincent's response, "Something's off about her. We need to be smarter about this." Layla watches them leave, memorizing faces and body language. In her rearview mirror, she sees them watching her car. "They're planning something," she whispers to herself. "Good. So am I." 2 days later, Layla attends a neighborhood association meeting, hoping to integrate into the community. The meeting room falls silent when she enters. Vincent is there with his friends, now identified as the Neighborhood Preservation Committee. During introductions, Layla mentions her military background, without specifying her SEAL training, and her work with veteran support organizations. The association president, clearly uncomfortable with Vincent's group but unwilling to challenge them, rushes through Layla's introduction. When community concerns are discussed, Vincent raises security issues and maintaining neighborhood standards. His coded language clearly targets Layla without direct reference. Several residents nod in agreement. Vincent proposes increased neighborhood patrols by his committee. When Layla professionally questions the legal authority for such patrols, Vincent interrupts. "Some people don't understand our traditions. Maybe where you're from, things work differently, but here we look out for our own." The room grows tense. Layla remains composed, but the public humiliation is evident. The president quickly changes the subject, unwilling to address the racism. After the meeting, several residents avoid eye contact with Layla. As she walks to her car, she overhears Vincent telling his group, "See how they always play the victim? Acting all educated doesn't change what she is." Layla's expression remains neutral, but we see a brief flash of the hardened operator beneath her civilian demeanor. Flashback to SEAL training, her commanding officer teaching psychological warfare tactics, emphasizing that sometimes allowing the enemy to believe they're winning creates strategic advantage. In her car, Layla receives a text from Helen warning her to be careful. Vincent's group has escalated from harassment to property damage with previous residents who challenged them. No one has been prosecuted because witnesses always seem to forget what they saw. As Layla drives home, she notices something disturbing. The streetlights near her house have been disabled, leaving her approach in darkness. Her phone shows no signal. This isn't random intimidation anymore. It's a coordinated trap. At home, Layla secures her perimeter, checking windows and doors. The calculated harassment has escalated beyond typical bigotry. Vincent's group is displaying tactical planning. Her military instincts activate fully. She retrieves a hidden case containing specialized equipment from her service days: surveillance detection tools, non-lethal defense items, communications gear. Not illegal, but not standard civilian equipment either. Layla calls a former SEAL teammate, Commander Jackson, using a secure communication protocol. Their conversation is crisp, tactical. Situation assessment? Organized harassment escalating to coordinated intimidation. 5 hostiles, local influence, community complicity. Authorities? Local police likely compromised or sympathetic to hostiles. Extraction option? Negative. Not retreating from American soil due to racial intimidation. Parameters? Defensive posture only. Non-lethal response. Documentation priority. Support required? Information gathering on hostile elements. Legal preparation for aftermath. Timeline? Imminent escalation expected within 48 hours based on pattern recognition. Jackson agrees to background research on Vincent's group and establishes a deadman protocol. If Layla doesn't check in every 12 hours, legal and federal authorities will be automatically notified with pre-compiled evidence. Layla then meticulously prepares her home: subtle defensive measures at entry points, concealed cameras covering approaches, emergency routes identified. She's not planning a confrontation, but SEAL training taught her to always prepare for worst-case scenarios. She reviews Vincent's pattern: escalating intimidation, testing boundaries, isolating targets, classical predatory behavior with racial motivation. She notes the systematic nature of their approach. This isn't their first target. On her secure laptop, Layla creates a detailed dossier on each member of Vincent's group, compiling public information and observations. She identifies their vehicles, routines, and connections in the community. This isn't revenge planning, it's tactical preparation. As Layla completes her preparations, neighborhood power suddenly cuts out, plunging her home into darkness. A vehicle slowly drives by without headlights. Her phone alerts her to perimeter motion at multiple points. They're making their move sooner than expected. Next morning, Layla discovers slashed tires on her car and a crude racial slur spray-painted on her garage door. Neighbors watch from windows but quickly retreat when she looks their way. No one offers help. She reports the vandalism to local police. The responding officer, visibly uncomfortable, suggests it might be random teenage mischief, despite the obvious targeted nature. He takes minimal notes and mentions how these investigations rarely lead anywhere. As the officer leaves, Layla notices him stopping to chat with Vincent, who watches from down the street with 2 of his friends. Their body language suggests familiarity. At the local hardware store buying supplies to repair her door, Layla encounters Vincent's friend from the grocery store confrontation. He makes a show of buying rope, duct tape, and other threatening items, making sure she sees them. "Big project tonight," he says loudly as she passes. Layla remains calm, but uses her phone to discreetly photograph him with the items. Later, she discovers her home internet has been cut. Cell service becomes intermittent, signal jamming, a tactic she recognizes from overseas operations. That evening, vehicles drive slowly past her house repeatedly. Flashlights probe her property from the street. Clear intimidation tactics designed to provoke fear and response. Instead of reacting, Layla uses counter-surveillance techniques to document every drive-by, every person involved. Her hidden cameras capture license plates and faces. She's building a comprehensive record while appearing to be an increasingly frightened target. From her darkened home, Layla watches Vincent's group growing bolder, now walking onto her property to shine lights through windows. They're testing response times, checking if she's called police. Standard pre-assault reconnaissance. Through her thermal imaging device, Layla observes 5 figures converging at the end of her street. Vincent distributes items from his truck. She can't identify them at this distance, but their purposeful movements suggest final preparation for whatever they've planned. 3 days of escalating intimidation. Layla maintains her routine while implementing countermeasures invisible to observers. Her apparent vulnerability is calculated. She's allowing Vincent's group to grow overconfident. Helen attempts to warn Layla that Vincent's group has taught lessons to previous residents who didn't fit in. The last family left town after their house was broken into, and family photos were defaced with threats. No arrests were ever made. Layla discovers someone has tampered with her car's brake lines and attempted serious harm beyond mere intimidation. She repairs it herself without reporting it, knowing local authorities won't help and not wanting to alert Vincent's group that she detected their sabotage. That night, a brick crashes through her window with a note. Last warning. Layla activates her secure line to Commander Jackson, updating him on the escalation to potentially lethal tactics. He offers to send team members as backup. Layla declines but establishes a clearer response protocol. She receives information from Jackson's background check. Vincent has connections to organized hate groups. 2 of his associates have criminal records, including assault. Most disturbing, a previous neighborhood resident was hospitalized after a home invasion that occurred after similar intimidation patterns. Layla makes her decision. She will not be driven from her home, nor will she allow this group to continue targeting others after her. She prepares for a controlled confrontation where she can document their criminal intent without engaging in illegal action herself. She leaks information through Helen that she'll be working late the following night, establishing a pattern that suggests she'll return home alone after dark. She appears increasingly afraid in public, giving Vincent's group the impression their tactics are working. Tomorrow night they make their move, Layla tells Commander Jackson, and they'll find out what happens when predators select the wrong target. The next evening, Layla appears to follow her established routine, leaving for work early and telling Helen she'll be back late. Instead, she executes a counter-surveillance route, circles back, and enters her home through a pre-established concealed access point. Inside, she prepares the environment. Subtle defensive positions, non-lethal countermeasures, recording devices activated. She's not creating a battlefield. She's creating a controlled space where she can document criminal behavior while defending herself within legal parameters. Through surveillance, she observes Vincent's group gathering at their usual meeting spot. 5 men, more heavily equipped than previous nights. Their conversation, picked up by Layla's directional microphone, confirms their intent. They plan to scare her straight out of town tonight with a direct confrontation. As darkness falls, Layla observes their tactical approach, more coordinated than expected. They disable streetlights along her route home, establish lookouts, and position vehicles to block easy escape routes. Their level of preparation suggests this isn't improvised harassment. It's a practiced operation they've conducted before. Layla updates Commander Jackson with a simple text. Engagement imminent. Protocol active. This triggers the monitoring of her live feed by former teammates and legal counsel, creating witnesses beyond the local jurisdiction. She then repositions to her vehicle and deliberately drives the route home, appearing unaware of the trap being set. As she parks in the public garage near her home, the one area without functioning security cameras, she pretends to be focused on her phone, presenting the vulnerable target they expect. Vincent's group converges from predetermined positions, blocking all visible exits, their movements showing practiced coordination. 5 men surround Layla Wilson in the deserted parking garage. Their leader steps forward. "Looks like you took a wrong turn. This neighborhood isn't for your kind." As the men close in, Vincent pulls something from his jacket. "After tonight, everyone like you will know better than to move into Westridge." The metal object catches the dim light, but Layla's already calculating her first 3 moves. The garage is dimly lit. Emergency exits blocked. Vincent and his 4 associates have positioned themselves in a standard intimidation formation, classic predatory encirclement. They believe they've cornered a frightened woman. Instead, they've walked into a controlled scenario designed by a combat specialist. "We're just going to have a friendly conversation about community standards," Vincent says, revealing a knife. "Unless you'd prefer to sign these papers saying you're putting your house up for sale. Your choice." Layla's demeanor shifts subtly. The frightened facade drops away, replaced by the focused presence of a trained operator. Her stance adjusts microscopically, weight balanced perfectly, hands positioned for immediate response. 5 armed attackers threatening a woman based on her race, Layla states calmly. "Just so we're clear about what's happening here." Vincent laughs. "No witnesses, no cameras, just us having a neighborhood chat." "Actually," Layla responds, her voice now carrying unmistakable authority, "everything since you disabled those streetlights has been recorded. Your vehicle's blocking escape routes, the weapons you're carrying, this conversation." Momentary confusion crosses Vincent's face. One of his associates shifts nervously. "Before this goes any further," Layla continues, "you should know exactly who you've targeted. I'm not just a homeowner you can intimidate. I'm Command Master Chief Layla Wilson, Navy Special Warfare Group 2, retired." Vincent sneers. "You expect us to believe?" Layla interrupts, her voice steady. 8 years as a SEAL combat specialist. Advanced training in close-quarters defense, counter-ambush tactics, and threat neutralization. Deployed in scenarios far worse than 5 untrained civilians in a parking garage. For the first time, uncertainty flickers across Vincent's face. One of his men takes a half-step back. "She's bluffing," Vincent insists, but his confidence wavers. "The moment you surrounded me, you entered my operational environment," Layla explains with unsettling calm. "I've controlled this scenario from the beginning. Your approach routes, timing, positions, all anticipated and recorded. Right now, 3 independent systems are transmitting this encounter to secure servers and live monitors." She gestures minimally toward hidden cameras. "Including your stated intent regarding the knife and coerced property documents. That's armed assault, attempted coercion, hate crime enhancements." Vincent's expression hardens. He steps forward aggressively, knife raised. "Nobody's coming to help you. By the time anyone reviews any recordings, this will be over." "Last warning," Layla states. "Disperse now, and the only charges will be the documented harassment and conspiracy." 2 of Vincent's associates exchange glances, clearly reconsidering. Vincent notices and barks, "She's one woman! There's 5 of us!" "Correct," Layla acknowledges. "Overwhelming odds." Then she adds with calm certainty, "For you." Vincent lunges forward with the knife. What follows is not chaotic violence, but a precise demonstration of elite combat training. Layla neutralizes Vincent with a controlled defensive sequence, redirecting his momentum, disarming him with a joint manipulation technique, and transitioning him to a restrained position on the ground in under 3 seconds. The remaining attackers freeze, suddenly confronting the reality that they've catastrophically misjudged their target. Layla stands balanced, Vincent immobilized but uninjured at her feet. "Your associate is secure, not injured. The choice remains the same for the rest of you." 2 immediately back away. A third drops a baton he'd been carrying. The 4th helps Vincent up as they retreat, Vincent clutching his wrist where Layla's precision hold controlled him. "This isn't over," Vincent threatens, but the fear in his voice contradicts his words. Layla's response is calm. "It was over before it began. You just didn't know it." As Vincent and his associates retreat, Layla activates her phone. "Engagement concluded. Evidence secured. Proceed with Phase 2. Their harassment campaign has just triggered consequences beyond anything they imagined. Following morning, Layla meets with FBI agents at a secure location, transferring comprehensive evidence. Surveillance footage, recorded threats, documentation of escalating harassment, tampering with her vehicle, property damage, and the final confrontation showing clear intent of racially motivated assault. The agents reveal Layla's case isn't isolated. Vincent's group has targeted multiple minority residents in surrounding communities. Previous victims were successfully intimidated into leaving or staying silent. Without Layla's methodical evidence gathering, local authorities had dismissed complaints as insufficient to pursue. "We've had reports about Westridge for years," Agent Daniels explains, reviewing Layla's meticulously organized files. "But never evidence this comprehensive. You've documented what we suspected was happening across multiple communities." "Military habits," Layla responds. "Document everything. Establish patterns. Secure the evidence." We learn Layla's military background includes specialized training in evidence collection and documentation for counterterrorism operations. Her protocols for recording the harassment campaign meet federal evidentiary standards where previous victims' amateur efforts failed. "Most victims are too traumatized to maintain this level of documentation," Agent Chen notes, "and they don't have your training in surveillance countermeasures." Meanwhile, Vincent attempts damage control, telling associates to destroy evidence and align their stories. Unaware of the extensive surveillance, he believes it's still his word against Layla's. He leverages local connections to pressure the police chief into treating the garage incident as mutual combat rather than attempted assault. "The Wilson woman attacked Vincent," he insists to the local police chief in his living room. "He was just defending himself. I've got witnesses." The police chief nods, uncomfortable but unwilling to challenge Vincent's influence. "We'll write it up as mutual altercation, inconclusive evidence." Federal involvement changes the equation. Vincent's group finds their homes being searched with warrants, electronic devices seized, and financial records examined. The investigation expands beyond harassment to connections with organized hate groups, potential involvement in previous unreported crimes, and conspiracy charges. Vincent's front door splinters as federal agents execute a search warrant. His shocked expression as they enter with documents detailing specific evidence requirements shows his miscalculation. This isn't the local police department he can manipulate. "This is harassment," Vincent shouts as agents methodically collect phones, computers, and documents. "You can't do this." "Federal warrant," the lead agent responds, handing him the document. "Suspected violations of multiple civil rights statutes, conspiracy to commit hate crimes, and interstate coordination with known extremist organizations. Community members who enabled or ignored the harassment face uncomfortable questions from federal investigators. The neighborhood association president is confronted with documentation showing he deliberately suppressed previous complaints about Vincent's group. Local police officers who dismissed reports face internal affairs investigations for potential civil rights violations." "I didn't think it was that serious," the association president stammers, faced with emails showing he buried complaints from 3 previous families. Vincent said they were exaggerating. "And you chose to believe that despite multiple similar reports?" The federal investigator's question hangs in the air. Layla works with prosecutors to identify additional victims, creating a pattern of evidence that elevates charges to federal hate crime status. She connects with advocacy organizations that provide support for those previously driven from their homes by similar intimidation campaigns. The Santiago family returns to the investigation headquarters, still visibly nervous after being forced from their Westridge home 6 months earlier. Their daughter, just 7 years old, still has nightmares about the men with flashlights who threatened her family. "We didn't have proof," Mr. Santiago explains, recognizing his family's experience in Layla's documentation of tactics. "Just our word against theirs. The police said without evidence they couldn't help." Layla offers the family her documented protocol for evidence collection. "This time you won't be alone. And this time you'll have the tools to protect yourselves legally." Vincent's group splinters under pressure. 2 members agree to testify against Vincent in exchange for reduced charges, revealing the systematic nature of their neighborhood protection activities and Vincent's leadership role. They confirm previous incidents, including the home invasion that hospitalized a former resident. Vincent called it making examples, his former associate testifies. Said if we scared off the first few, others would get the message and stay away. It worked for years. The FBI investigation uncovers Vincent's communications with similar groups in other communities, revealing a loose network sharing successful intimidation tactics and coordinating to maintain neighborhood demographic control. The evidence transforms what appeared to be isolated local incidents into a pattern of organized civil rights violations. Agent Daniels updates Layla as the case expands. Your documentation gave us the thread to pull. Now we're unraveling similar operations in 7 counties. These groups communicate, coordinate, share tactics. They've been operating in plain sight for years. The section culminates with federal indictments against Vincent and his core associates on multiple charges, including civil rights violations, conspiracy, assault with a deadly weapon, and hate crimes. Local enablers face charges ranging from obstruction of justice to accessory after the fact. The United States Justice Department is announcing today federal indictments against 7 individuals in connection with organized campaigns of racially motivated intimidation and housing discrimination. The U.S. Attorney announces at a press conference. These indictments represent our commitment to ensuring all Americans can live where they choose without fear of targeted harassment. As federal agents lead Vincent away in handcuffs, a news crew captures the scene. The reporter turns to Layla. Sources say you single-handedly exposed an organized hate group that's operated with impunity for years. How did one woman accomplish what authorities couldn't? Federal courthouse, 3 months later. Vincent's trial reveals the full extent of his operation. Evidence shows his Neighborhood Preservation Committee systematically targeted minority homeowners across multiple communities, using escalating intimidation tactics refined over years. The courtroom sits in tense silence as prosecutors display timeline evidence connecting Vincent's group to 17 separate harassment campaigns over 5 years. Maps show how they methodically prevented integration of targeted neighborhoods through coordinated intimidation. Vincent's defense attempts to portray him as a concerned citizen protecting property values. This strategy collapses when prosecutors present his communications with known hate group leaders, discussing effective removal techniques and successful territory defense. The defendant wasn't protecting a neighborhood, the prosecutor emphasizes, displaying Vincent's messages on the courtroom screen. He was enforcing racial segregation through systematic intimidation and violence. Most damaging, testimony from previous victims who returned once they learned federal protection was available. Their experiences establish a clear pattern matching exactly what Vincent attempted with Layla. A methodical campaign designed to appear random and deniable while forcing targets to leave. Dr. Elaine Foster describes how her family endured 3 months of escalating harassment before leaving. First it was stares, then whispers, then our car tires slashed, then threatening notes. After our windows were broken and we found racial slurs painted inside our home, we left. We just wanted our children to feel safe. Vincent's remaining loyal associate attempts to claim they never intended violence in the garage confrontation, just intimidation. Prosecutors counter with enhanced audio from Layla's recordings capturing their discussions of making an example and teaching a lesson no one would forget. If she doesn't leave after tonight, we escalate to phase 3. Vincent's voice plays clearly through the courtroom speakers. Same as we did with the Rodriguez family. The turning point comes when Vincent, frustrated by his disintegrating defense, erupts in court with a racist tirade that confirms every element of the prosecution's case regarding motive and intent. His outburst demolishes any pretense of being a concerned citizen. "Those neighborhoods were fine until they started moving in," Vincent shouts, ignoring his attorney's attempts to silence him. "Someone had to protect what we built. Those communities aren't meant for their kind." The jury deliberates briefly before returning guilty verdicts on all major counts. The judge, delivering the maximum sentence, cites the calculated nature of the defendant's campaign of terror against fellow citizens based solely on their race. and the years of trauma inflicted on multiple families under the guise of community protection. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison, the judge pronounces. Your actions represent the antithesis of the community values you claim to protect. Vincent, facing significant prison time, is led away still shouting threats and slurs. His former associates, having accepted plea deals, receive reduced but substantial sentences for their roles in the conspiracy. Outside the courthouse, media coverage highlights the broader significance. One of the first successful federal prosecutions of suburban hate-based housing discrimination in the region, potentially creating precedent for similar cases nationwide. Today's verdict sends a message that organized intimidation based on race will be prosecuted with the full force of federal law, the U.S. Attorney states to assembled reporters, "No American should live in fear because of their race or background." As Layla leaves the courthouse, she's approached by a Justice Department official. "What you've done here isn't just about one case. We've identified similar patterns in 12 other communities. Would you consider consulting on a national task force addressing organized housing discrimination?" 1 year later, Layla participates in a Department of Justice community forum on combating organized housing discrimination. The case against Vincent's group has become a model for federal intervention, where local authorities fail to protect residents' civil rights. The crowded community center represents a transformed landscape. Legal experts, community organizers, law enforcement, and formerly targeted residents gather to discuss implementation of new protocols developed since Vincent's conviction. New FBI protocols have been established for identifying and investigating patterns of coordinated intimidation targeting minority homeowners. Layla's evidence collection methodology has been adapted into training materials for civil rights investigators. The Wilson Protocol fundamentally changes our approach, FBI Civil Rights Division Director Harmon explains to the audience. Instead of treating these as isolated incidents, we now recognize organized patterns and apply appropriate investigative resources. Legal reforms include enhanced penalties for organized intimidation campaigns and strengthened protections for those reporting housing discrimination. Federal oversight has been implemented for jurisdictions with patterns of dismissing such complaints. Local law enforcement agencies must now document and report all suspected bias-motivated intimidation, U.S. Attorney Griffith outlines. Patterns of non-enforcement trigger automatic federal review. Community leaders from several states share how the precedent from Layla's case helped them address similar issues in their neighborhoods. A national support network has formed connecting victims of housing discrimination, providing resources and evidence collection guidance. Before the Wilson case, we were fighting isolated battles, explains community organizer Diaz from Arizona. Now we're connected nationwide, sharing documentation techniques and building evidence portfolios that meet federal standards. Layla has established a foundation training veterans to use their specialized skills in civil rights monitoring and documentation. Their mission: deploy the same level of tactical expertise to protecting American citizens at home that they use to protect American interests abroad. Veterans possess unique skills in threat assessment, documentation, and operational security, Layla explains to interested participants. These same skills that protect our nation overseas can protect civil rights at home. The forum addresses ongoing challenges, identifying covert discrimination tactics, overcoming community complicity, and rebuilding trust in areas with histories of enforcement failure. Layla emphasizes that policies alone cannot transform communities. Engaged citizens willing to stand against intimidation are essential. The law is only as effective as our willingness to uphold it, she tells the audience. Documentation creates accountability, but community courage creates change. Several former residents who were driven out of Westridge have returned to reclaim their homes, now part of a more diverse and welcoming community. The neighborhood association, under new leadership, has implemented accountability measures and community education programs. As the forum concludes, Layla receives notification that her foundation's methodology is being considered for nationwide implementation. Your experience has turned one confrontation in a dark garage into a national movement. the Justice Department representative tells her. How do we scale this to protect every American's right to live where they choose? Layla returns to Westridge, now transformed. New families from diverse backgrounds have moved in, welcomed by community members who previously remained silent out of fear. Helen hosts regular neighborhood gatherings explicitly designed to build connections across cultural differences. The evening sun casts long shadows as Layla walks through streets once hostile to her presence. Children of various backgrounds play together on lawns where Vincent's truck once prowled. Neighbors wave to her, some with the easy familiarity of friendship, others with the respectful acknowledgement of her role in the community's transformation. The garage where the confrontation occurred has been repurposed as a community center with programs focused on civil rights education and cultural exchange. A mural on one wall depicts diverse hands joined together, funded by former neighborhood association members as acknowledgement of their past failures to act. Inside, residents gather for workshops on recognizing and responding to discrimination. The current session focuses on bystander intervention, how to safely support targeted community members. Layla leads specialized training for community volunteers, teaching them to recognize and document discrimination without escalation. Her approach emphasizes legal preparation over confrontation. Justice doesn't require combat. It requires evidence, persistence, and courage. Most discrimination isn't defeated through physical confrontation, she explains to attentive participants. It's defeated through documentation, community solidarity, and legal accountability. Former SEAL teammates visit, impressed by how she's adapted their tactical principles to civilian protection. One comments, "We trained to defend American values overseas. You're showing us how to defend them at home." Commander Jackson surveys the community center's wall of success stories, photographs of families who have returned to communities they were once driven from. Different battlefield, same mission, he observes, protecting the principles that make America worth defending. Layla meets with a young family considering moving to the neighborhood. They'd heard about the area's troubled history, but also its transformation. She shares her experience honestly, but emphasizes the community's growth. What matters isn't whether a place has a perfect past, but whether its people are committed to a better future. In her home office, Layla reviews reports from similar initiatives spreading nationwide. Maps track successful interventions in communities where intimidation campaigns have been disrupted and accountability established. Her phone regularly receives messages from people using her protocols to document discrimination in their own neighborhoods. Another success in Minnesota, she notes, adding a pin to her map. Organized intimidation documented, federal charges filed, community recovering. Layla walking through her neighborhood at night, the same streets once used to intimidate her now peaceful and welcoming. A neighbor waves from their porch. Children play in yards without tension or fear. Layla reflects on the transformation, not just of the community, but of her own mission. Her SEAL training prepared her to handle the confrontation in the garage, but her true impact came from what followed: systematic evidence collection, community rebuilding, and creating pathways for others to stand their ground against intimidation. The episode ends with Layla training a diverse group of community advocates. On screen behind her, a simple message. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important. If this story resonated with you, you're going to love what's coming next on Beat Stories. We're bringing you more true accounts of justice served, strategic empowerment, and systematic accountability in professional settings. Hit that subscribe button right now to never miss our weekly doses of justice being served to those who abuse their authority. These aren't just stories, they're masterclasses in strategic empowerment. Like this video to help more people discover how documentation and strategic patience can transform personal discrimination into institutional change. Your engagement helps us reach those who need these strategies most.
What happened today isn't just a story. It's a reminder. Silence protects systems, but courage rewrites them. At Beat Stories, we don't just watch change, We document it. Subscribe for more real stories that challenge power and amplify truth.